My name is Rachel Doyle. I'm 36 years old. 2 weeks before my daughter Emma's 10th birthday, my mother called to tell me there wouldn't be a family party this year. We put that money towards your nephew's braces, she said, like she was reporting the weather. Orthodontics aren't cheap, Rachel. Emma will understand when she's older. Emma was sitting on the couch 4 feet away from me, pretending not to listen, and understanding every word. What my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Emma's birthday money had never come from her in the first place. It had come from me. And I was about to stop pretending otherwise. For as long as Emma has been alive, my parents have run something they call the family fund, a joint account they set up years ago, originally meant to cover shared costs for grandchildren's birthdays, holidays, the occasional emergency. Every family member with kids contributes monthly. My parents manage the account and decide, each month, where the money goes. It sounded reasonable when they first proposed it, at a Thanksgiving dinner 11 years ago, before Emma was even born. My brother Mark had 2 kids by then, my sister Julie had 1, and the idea was that pooling resources meant no single grandchild's birthday would ever be smaller than another's, regardless of which parent was going through a hard year financially. I contributed $200 a month, every month, for over a decade. So did Mark. Julie contributed less, citing her single income, and nobody ever pushed her on it. My parents absorbed the difference quietly, the same way they absorbed a lot of things where Julie was concerned. I never audited the account. I trusted my parents to manage it fairly, the way you trust people who raised you to be fair, until you have a specific, undeniable reason not to. At that moment, I believed the family fund was working exactly the way it was supposed to. I had no idea how wrong I was. Emma is quiet in the way I was quiet at her age, watchful, careful, quick to notice when something in a room has shifted even before anyone says a word out loud. She's the kind of kid who remembers exact details other people forget, what someone was wearing, what song was playing, what was said right before an adult changed the subject. She loves horses, drawing, and a video game about building underwater cities that I don't fully understand but have learned to ask about anyway. Her birthday is in early October, and every year since she turned 3, my parents have hosted a family party for her at their house, cake, a small gathering of cousins, a modest but real celebration that Emma looked forward to for weeks in advance. This year, she'd been talking about it since August. She wanted a horse-themed cake. She wanted her cousin Tyler, my brother's son, to come because they'd gotten close over the summer. She'd made a list, unprompted, of 3 friends from school she hoped could come to a small second gathering afterward. I want to be clear that I never spoiled Emma. My husband Adam and I are careful with money, we're not wealthy, we budget closely, we say no to things regularly. But we had never, not once, told Emma there simply wouldn't be a birthday. My mother did. The call came on a Tuesday evening. Emma was on the couch doing homework, close enough to hear my side of the conversation, which I didn't realize would matter until it was too late to stop it. I wanted to talk to you about Emma's party, my mother said. We're going to skip it this year. I asked why, assuming there was a scheduling conflict, a health issue, something ordinary. Money's tight right now, she said. Tyler needs braces, full orthodontic work, it's almost $4,000. We had to pull from the family fund to cover it. There just isn't room for a party this year. I sat with that for a second, doing math I didn't want to be doing. Mom, I put $200 a month into that fund for 10 years. That's over $24,000. You're telling me there's nothing left for a birthday party that costs maybe $200, total? It's not that simple, Rachel. There are other expenses. Julie's had a hard year. We help where we can. Does Julie contribute to the fund? A pause. She contributes what she can. I didn't push further in that moment, because Emma was still sitting on the couch, and I didn't want her hearing the specific shape of what I was starting to suspect. So I said the only thing I could say honestly. Fine. We'll figure something out ourselves. You understand, right? My mother said. Family comes first. Tyler needed this. I hung up without answering that question, because I didn't understand, and I wasn't going to pretend that I did. Emma didn't say anything right away. She kept her eyes on her homework for a long moment after I hung up, the particular stillness she gets when she's processing something she doesn't want to ask about directly. Finally, she said, without looking up, "Is Grandma canceling my birthday?" I told her the truth, as gently as I could, that we'd have a birthday no matter what, that Grandma and Grandpa weren't going to host the family party this year, but that didn't mean her birthday wasn't happening. "Because of Tyler's braces," she said. It wasn't a question. She'd heard everything. I asked her how she felt about that. She thought about it for a while. Emma always thinks before she answers, even at 10, and then said, "I don't care about the party. I just don't get why they said it like that. Like it was my fault for wanting one." I didn't have a good answer for her in that moment. I still think about that sentence more than almost anything else that happened over the following months, because a 10-year-old had understood, faster and more clearly than I had let myself admit, exactly what was happening to her. She wasn't being told no. She was being told she didn't matter enough to be a priority, and being handed a dollar figure, Tyler's braces, as the specific proof of it. That night, after Emma went to bed, I told Adam everything. He listened the way he always does, quietly, letting me get to the end before saying anything. "This isn't new," he said finally. "You know that, right? This is just the first time it's happened to Emma instead of you." He was right, and hearing him say it out loud made something click into place that I'd spent years avoiding looking at directly. My whole childhood, resources in my family had moved toward Julie in ways nobody ever called favoritism, because each instance came with its own reasonable-sounding explanation. Julie needed help with her car in college, I didn't, so I didn't get equivalent help. Julie needed a loan for her apartment deposit after her divorce, I didn't ask, so I didn't get an equivalent gift. Every explanation was airtight on its own. It was only in aggregate, over 30 years, that the pattern became undeniable. Now it wasn't happening to me anymore. It was happening to my daughter, dressed up in the language of an orthodontist's invoice. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about the specific cruelty of the excuse my mother had chosen, not "we can't afford it," which would have been sad but understandable, but "we spent it on your cousin's braces," a sentence engineered to make Emma feel like a specific, named child had been chosen over her, using money that was never actually my parents' to redirect in the first place. 2 days later, I called Mark. He's my older brother, and while we're not especially close, he's always been straightforward, the kind of person who says what he thinks even when it's inconvenient. I asked him directly, had he heard anything about the family fund being tight? "No," he said. "Why?" I told him what happened, Emma's cancelled party, the braces explanation, my own decade of $200 monthly contributions. There was a long silence on the line. "I put in $200 a month too," he said slowly. "Have for years. Rachel, that's a lot of money over a decade. Between the two of us alone, that's like 50 grand. $52,800, to be exact, which I calculated later that night, unable to stop myself. 2 contributors, $200 each, monthly, for 11 years. Mark asked the question I hadn't wanted to ask out loud yet, has Mom ever shown either of us a breakdown of what's actually in that account? She hadn't. Not once, in 11 years, had either of us seen a statement, a ledger, anything beyond her verbal assurance that the money was being managed fairly. We had trusted her completely, the way children trust parents even well into adulthood, right up until a 10-year-old's cancelled birthday party forced the question into the open. I called my mother and asked, as calmly as I could manage, to see a full accounting of the family fund, every contribution, every withdrawal, going back as far as records existed. She didn't answer right away. "Why would you need that?" "It's not like you don't trust me." "I'd just like to see it, Mom." "It's a reasonable thing to ask about an account I put over $20,000 into." "It's complicated to pull together," she said. "There's a lot of history in that account." "I have time," I said. "I'll wait." She didn't call back that week. Or the next. When I followed up, she told me she was still gathering everything, a phrase that, over the following month, would repeat itself 3 more times, each time with a slightly different excuse. The bank statements were archived, she needed to find an old folder, my father was handling that part and he was busy. I want to be honest about what I felt during those weeks. It wasn't rage yet. It was something quieter and more clarifying, the specific, sinking recognition that a woman who managed a shared family account for 11 years apparently could not produce a single record of it on request, and that the timing of this discovery had been forced entirely by her decision to cancel my daughter's birthday over $4,000 in braces. Emma's actual birthday fell on a Thursday that year. Adam and I threw her a small celebration at home, just the 3 of us, a cake she picked out herself, a movie of her choosing. It was warm, and she seemed genuinely happy in the moment, which made what happened afterward harder, not easier. That night, after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook where I'd started tracking the family fund math, trying to make the numbers work out to something other than what they clearly were. I looked, for a long time, at the folder on my laptop where I kept old photos, Emma's first birthday, her second, every year building on the last, every single one hosted at my parents' house, every single one photographed and celebrated like it mattered. I thought about how many of those photos I'd take, over the years, believing this family operated on some baseline of fairness I had simply failed to notice wasn't real. I thought about Emma's sentence, "I just don't get why they said it like that," and realized that somewhere in the last decade, I had stopped expecting my parents to explain themselves to me the same way I'd apparently trained myself not to expect it as a child. I had accepted, without ever consciously deciding to, that being asked to justify unfairness wasn't something that happened in this family. You simply absorbed it, quietly, the way I always had. I closed the laptop. I had spent my whole life waiting for my parents to treat me the way they treated Julie without my having to ask. Watching them do the same thing to my daughter, I understood, finally, that waiting had never once worked, and it wasn't going to start working now. 3 weeks after Emma's birthday, my father, not my mother, finally sent me a partial accounting, apparently without telling her. I think he did it because he'd overheard Emma, at a separate family dinner, quietly correct her cousin Tyler when Tyler mentioned his braces money, saying, "That was supposed to be for my birthday too." My father, from what I understand, went very quiet after that. The records he sent were incomplete, but even the partial picture was clarifying. Over the prior 4 years alone, the fund had covered Tyler's braces, a portion of Julie's car repair, half of Julie's rent during a 2-month gap between jobs, and a family emergency withdrawal that, when I asked directly, turned out to be a loan to Julie that had never been repaid. In that same 4-year window, exactly one expenditure had gone toward Emma or Mark's 2 children combined, birthday cakes, totaling around $600 across 3 kids over 4 years. Mark and I had put in roughly $19,200 combined over that same period. Julie, by her own admission, had contributed intermittently, when she could, which worked out to a fraction of that. I sat with those numbers for a long time before calling my mother again. I didn't yell. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect this part of the story to be loud, and it wasn't. It was the calmest conversation I've ever had with my mother, and I think that's exactly what made it land the way it did. "I saw the numbers Dad sent," I said. Julie's rent. Julie's car. A loan that was never paid back. And Emma's birthday got cancelled over Tyler's braces, using an account Mark and I funded almost entirely by ourselves. "It's not that simple," my mother started, the same sentence she always reached for. "It actually is that simple," I said. "You didn't run out of money. You chose, repeatedly, over years, to prioritize Julie's expenses over my daughter's birthday party. And then you told a 10-year-old, directly, that the reason was her cousin's braces, as if I hadn't put more money into that account than anyone." There was a long silence. "I don't understand why you're being like this," my mother finally said. "It was one birthday party." "It wasn't one birthday party, Mom. It was 11 years of a pattern I let happen to me, and I'm not going to let it happen to my kid without saying something." "I don't understand why you became so difficult about this," she said. I didn't become difficult, I said. I stopped standing in a place where my daughter was treated like an afterthought while I paid for the privilege. I don't think that sentence changed her mind. But I meant every word of it, and for the first time in my life, I didn't take it back. Mark and I withdrew from the family fund within the same week, independently of each other, without discussing it first. When we compared notes afterward, neither of us was surprised the other had made the same decision. I opened a separate account instead, just for Emma, funded by Adam and me alone, with full transparency between us about every dollar in and out. It wasn't about the money itself. $200 a month was never going to make or break our finances. It was about never again handing a decision that directly affected my daughter to someone who had proven, with documentation, that she wasn't going to make that decision fairly. Julie found out about the withdrawal a few weeks later, from my mother, and called me, the first time she'd called me directly in over a year. "You're really doing this over a birthday party," she said. "I'm doing this because I finally saw the numbers," I said. "You know what was in that account better than I did. I don't think you owe me an apology. I think you owe yourself an honest look at how comfortable it's been to let this keep happening." She didn't have much to say to that. I don't think she was being deliberately cruel. Over the years, I think she was doing what people often do when a system quietly benefits them, not asking too many questions about how it worked. The following year, Emma turned 11. We didn't ask my parents to host anything. We didn't need to. Adam and I threw her a full party ourselves, the horse-themed cake she'd wanted the year before, her 3 friends from school, a small gathering that cost far less than $4,000 and meant, to her, considerably more than any party our extended family had ever organized. My parents came, this time as guests rather than hosts. My mother brought a gift and said very little about the previous year. My father, at one point, pulled me aside while Emma was blowing out candles. "I should have sent you those records the first time you asked," he said. I didn't understand how bad it looked until I actually put it together myself. It wasn't an apology, exactly. But it was closer to honesty than I'd gotten from either of my parents in years, and I let it be enough, for that moment. Emma, later that night, said something I've thought about often since. "This was the best birthday I've ever had," she said, "and Grandma didn't even plan it." I didn't correct her. I didn't need to. She'd understood the whole thing more clearly than any adult in her family had managed to, months before any of us caught up to her. People who hear this story sometimes expect a bigger reveal, a lawsuit, a dramatic public confrontation, a total rupture with my parents. That's not what happened, and I think it's more honest to say so plainly. What happened instead was smaller, and in some ways harder. I stopped assuming fairness where I had no evidence of it, and I stopped waiting for my parents to volunteer honesty they'd never once volunteered on their own. I built something separate for my daughter instead, not out of spite, but because I finally understood that waiting for someone else to prioritize her fairly wasn't a plan. It was just a habit I'd inherited from being the child who never got told no directly, only ever quietly deprioritized in ways that were each, individually, defensible. I used to think the worst thing my family could do was disappoint me. I've since learned there's something worse, watching them do it to your child, and recognizing, in that exact moment, that you have a choice your own childhood self never had. I could let it become her habit too, or I could name it, plainly, the first time it happened. I named it. That's the whole story, really, not a reveal, not a triumph, just a decision to stop absorbing quietly the moment it started happening to someone I was responsible for protecting. Emma is 13 now. She still remembers the year her party got cancelled, though she talks about it less as a wound and more as a fact of her history, the year Grandma said the wrong thing, and Mom did something about it. I think that's the version of this story I want her to carry forward, more than any other detail. Not that her grandparents failed her once, but that when they did, someone noticed out loud, and made sure it didn't quietly become the next 11 years. If there's a lesson in this, it's a small one, but I believe it completely. Fairness that depends on nobody ever asking questions isn't fairness. It's just an arrangement that hasn't been examined yet. The moment I finally asked, everything about how that family fund actually worked became visible, and once I could see it, I couldn't unsee it, and I wasn't willing to let my daughter grow up inside it the way I had. If you've ever had to name a pattern in your own family out loud, the first time, after years of staying quiet, I'd love to hear how you got there. Let me know in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one coming every week.